You are too big for a wife. She was unwanted until an Apache saw her power. People there had simple expectations. Boys were meant to be strong, girls gentle. But from the very beginning, she was different. From the moment she took her first steps, she seemed taller, stronger, and more aware than the other children. She moved with a confidence that startled some adults and drew curious eyes from other children. While other girls played quietly, pretending to be tiny and delicate, she ran faster, climbed higher, and laughed louder. Her parents noticed it first. Her mother, kind but cautious, would sometimes frown, wondering if their daughter would ever fit into the world they knew. Her father, a hardworking man with broad shoulders and a gentle voice, secretly admired her strength, but even he worried. People in their town whispered about the girl, calling her too big, too bold, or different. At school, things were not easier. The teachers, though kind in their own ways, expected her to be like other girls, quiet, obedient, and easy to guide. But she had a mind of her own. She asked questions that were too complicated, challenged instructions she didn't agree with, and stood up to children who teased her. It was in the playground that she first felt the sting of being unwanted. Other girls would sometimes invite each other to play dolls, skipping rope, or pretend tea parties. She tried to join them once or twice, her small heart hoping to be accepted. But she was too tall to sit properly on the little chairs. Her laughter, loud and infectious, startled them. When she reached for a doll, it seemed to disappear from her hands as if no one wanted her in their game. Soon, she stopped trying. Instead, she ran, climbed trees, and swung higher than anyone else. She learned to enjoy her own company, finding comfort in the sky above and the branches she could reach. As she grew older, the whispers grew louder. Boys at school sometimes laughed at her when she carried heavy things effortlessly or beat them in running races. Girls often kept their distance, unsure what to make of someone who didn't fit the usual patterns. Even relatives sometimes commented, "She's too strong for her own good," or "No one will want a girl like her." Those words pierced her heart more than any playground joke. She wondered in quiet moments if there was something wrong with her, something she could change. But every time she tried to shrink herself, she felt wrong, like she was hiding the very part of her that made her alive. Her home was a small refuge, though not always safe from the outside world's judgment. She would spend hours helping her father in the fields, lifting heavy baskets of produce, or carrying firewood back to the house. Neighbors would often stop and stare. Some admired her strength, secretly wishing their daughters had a similar courage, but most only whispered behind closed doors. "Too big for a wife," they said under their breath, as if speaking it loudly would make it true. Those words haunted her, but they also lit a quiet fire inside her. She didn't want to be anyone's idea of a normal girl. She wanted to be herself, even if the world wasn't ready for her. School was both a battlefield and a sanctuary. She loved learning, always curious about how things worked, how people thought, and why the world was the way it was. Teachers often praised her intelligence, but it didn't erase the feeling of being unwanted. During recess, she would walk alone, exploring the edge of the town, climbing hills, or watching the river flow. She loved the freedom it offered, a place where no one judged her for being taller, stronger, or braver than expected. She began to understand that being different was not a flaw, it was simply who she was. But it was a lesson learned quietly, without applause, and often in the company of silence. The loneliness, however, was sometimes unbearable. She longed for friends who would accept her fully, for people who would admire her for what she was, not what she was. She watched other girls giggle with their companions, go to dances, and be praised for delicate beauty. She wondered if she would ever be wanted, if someone could look past her strength and boldness and see the heart beneath. Night after night, she lay awake, imagining a life where she didn't feel out of place, a life where she didn't have to prove herself constantly just to be accepted. Yet her difference came with gifts. She was fearless in ways that others weren't. She climbed trees with ease, ran faster than the boys, and faced challenges with determination. When a neighbor's horse broke loose, she was the first to chase after it, calming it with steady hands while adults hesitated. When younger children were afraid to cross the river, she held their hands firmly, showing them it was safe. Small acts of courage became her signature, and though the town often dismissed them, she began to understand her own power. By the time she reached her teenage years, she was fully aware of her uniqueness. She had learned to walk with pride, to hold her head high even when whispers followed her down the street. Yet, the feeling of being unwanted remained, a shadow she could not easily shake. Boys her age still avoided her, calling her too intimidating, too strong, or too independent. Girls were polite but distant, unsure how to include someone so different. Even well-meaning adults would sometimes make comments that reminded her she didn't fit the mold. But with every rejection, her determination grew. She refused to let anyone's opinion define her value. She started practicing her skills in secret, learning to run faster, lift heavier objects, and challenge herself physically. She loved the sense of control it gave her, the proof that she was capable of more than anyone expected. Her parents supported her quietly, proud yet cautious. They knew the world outside would never fully understand her, but they also knew she had a strength that could carry her far if nurtured correctly. In private moments, she would smile at herself in the mirror, realizing that her size and power were not burdens. They were gifts waiting to be recognized. Despite her growing confidence, a part of her still ached for acceptance. She wanted someone to see her not as too big or too bold, but as a person with heart, courage, and dreams. She longed for a connection that went beyond appearances, a place where she didn't have to hide the very traits that made her extraordinary. But the world around her had yet to meet someone like her. She learned patience, resilience, and self-reliance. Every whisper of doubt, every rejection, and every glance of skepticism became fuel for her journey. She realized that being unwanted didn't make her weak. It simply meant she had to find the right eyes to see her true worth. By the end of those early years, she had grown into a young woman who knew her strength, embraced her differences, and refused to bow to societal expectations. She had learned that being unwanted by many did not erase her power. It simply delayed the moment when the right person, the right circumstance, would finally recognize her. And deep in her heart, she believed that someday, someone would not only accept her strength but admire it. And in that hope, she quietly nurtured the fire that would carry her into the next chapter of her life. Life for her after those lonely early years was far from easy. Though she had grown into a strong and confident young woman, the world outside her home remained unkind and unaccepting. Every day felt like a test, a challenge to prove herself in ways others never asked of anyone else. The town continued to whisper about her, calling her too big, too bold, or too different, as if repeating it often enough could make it true. But she refused to let the words break her spirit. Instead, she used them as fuel, learning to work harder, run faster, and push herself further than anyone imagined. Her days were long and often exhausting. She helped her parents with chores from sunrise to sunset. Carrying heavy baskets of vegetables, hauling firewood, and tending to animals became her daily routine. While other girls were at home learning sewing or preparing for social events, she was in the fields, sweating under the sun, lifting loads that even grown men sometimes struggled with. People often stopped to watch her, some in admiration, but most with disbelief or gossip. "She's far too strong for a girl," they would whisper. "Who could ever want her?" Those words stung at times, but she had learned to ignore them, or at least to wear a brave face in public. School was another battlefield. Though she loved learning, it was not always easy to concentrate in a place filled with judgment. Teachers sometimes praised her intelligence, but classmates often made her feel out of place. Boys teased her when she excelled in sports, calling her names meant to embarrass her. Girls often whispered, avoiding her, unsure how to connect with someone who seemed so different. Despite this, she refused to let their negativity dim her spirit. She buried herself in her studies, learning about history, nature, and the human body. She discovered a love for books and knowledge, realizing that while people might reject her, the world of ideas was always open. The physical challenges she embraced became her sanctuary. She ran through fields at dawn, feeling the wind rush past her face, the sun warming her back. She climbed trees, raced streams, and learned to balance on narrow logs over rushing water. Each achievement gave her a sense of mastery and control. When a storm knocked down a neighbor's fence, she was the first to run and help, lifting heavy planks with ease while adults struggled. When younger children feared to cross a swollen river, she would guide them with steady hands, assuring them of safety. These small acts of courage became her way of claiming a place in a world that often overlooked her. Despite her growing independence, the feeling of being unwanted never fully left her. She watched other young women being admired, courted, or praised for their beauty and softness, and she wondered if she would ever experience the same. Boys at school avoided her, afraid of her strength or her confidence. Some girls were polite but distant, unsure how to interact with someone who did not fit their idea of femininity. Even well-meaning adults sometimes made comments that reminded her she was different. Yet each rejection, each avoidance, only strengthened her resolve. She knew she could not force people to accept her, but she could continue growing and becoming someone no one could ignore. Her parents were her quiet supporters. Her father, who had always admired her strength, taught her practical skills, showing her how to repair tools, manage animals, and face difficult situations calmly. Her mother, though more cautious, encouraged her to follow her instincts and embrace her unique qualities. Together, they nurtured her confidence without trying to force her into the mold society expected. They knew she would have to navigate a harsh world on her own, but they also knew she possessed the courage to do it. In their home, she was not too big or too bold. She was simply herself, and that was enough. As she grew older, she realized that being unwanted by others did not mean she lacked value. It simply meant the world around her had not yet learned to appreciate strength and individuality in a woman. She began to focus not on fitting in, but on honing her skills and expanding her knowledge. She learned to repair broken equipment, navigate forests, climb mountains, and handle animals with skill and care. Each new ability was a small victory, a quiet reminder that her strength was not a curse but a gift. She learned that independence was not only necessary but empowering. Friends were rare, but she cherished the few bonds she formed. There were moments of genuine laughter with children younger than her, times when animals seemed to understand her in a way humans often could not, and the rare kindness from strangers who noticed her heart as well as her strength. These moments became lifelines, small reminders that the world was not entirely unkind, even if many tried to dismiss her. She learned to treasure connection wherever it appeared, no matter how brief or unexpected. Work became her path to respect. She took jobs that others avoided, lifting, carrying, helping in construction, and tending to tasks that required both courage and physical strength. Slowly, people began to notice. The whispers did not disappear entirely, but admiration began to replace some of the judgment. When neighbors faced difficulties, she was often the first to offer help. Her actions spoke louder than words. She didn't need to be liked to be respected. She began to understand that recognition and acceptance were earned through deeds, not appearances. Even so, loneliness remained a shadow. She longed for someone who could see beyond her size and strength, someone who could understand her heart and mind. At night, she would lie awake, imagining conversations with people who appreciated her for who she was, not what she appeared to be. She dreamed of a place where she could fully be herself without fear of judgment, a world where strength and courage were celebrated rather than feared. These dreams became her motivation, pushing her to keep learning, growing, and striving for more. Her spirit was not broken by adversity, it was strengthened. Every challenge, every glance of doubt, every whispered comment about her being too much became fuel for her determination. She learned to face difficulties with resilience, to embrace solitude without despair, and to recognize her own value without relying on others' approval. In the quiet moments, she smiled at her reflection, seeing a young woman strong in body, mind, and heart, a person capable of far more than anyone had yet imagined. By her late teens, she had grown into a young woman of remarkable strength, skill, and courage. She had learned to navigate a world that often failed to understand her, to embrace her differences fully, and to find meaning and purpose in her own actions. She no longer sought approval from those who could not see her worth. Instead, she focused on becoming the best version of herself, knowing that one day, someone would recognize the power and heart she had carried quietly all her life. It was in this stage of her life that the seeds of transformation began to take root. Though she still felt the sting of being unwanted, she had discovered a strength within herself that no one could take away. She had learned that life was not about fitting into other people's expectations, but about embracing who she truly was and finding her own place in the world. And though she did not yet know it, someone would soon appear, someone who would see her in a way no one else had and recognize the full extent of her power. Her life, until now, had been filled with struggle, solitude, and quiet determination. She had grown strong, skilled, and wise beyond her years, but she still carried the weight of being unwanted. Then one day, everything began to shift in a way she could never have predicted. It was the day the Apache arrived in the town, a leader known for his strength, wisdom, and deep understanding of people. His presence was commanding, yet calm, and there was a quiet authority in the way he moved and spoke. He was different from anyone she had ever seen, and from the moment she noticed him, something inside her stirred. At first, she observed him from a distance. The townspeople were fascinated, whispering and staring as he walked through the streets. But she saw more than his physical presence. She noticed the way his eyes seemed to look beyond the surface, the careful way he listened to people, and the respect he seemed to give to even the smallest child or weakest animal. Unlike everyone else, he did not flinch at her height or strength. He did not whisper or stare. Instead, he acknowledged her silently, as though he already knew there was something extraordinary about her. That small recognition, though wordless, sent a rush of hope through her heart. Their first interaction was unexpected. She was carrying a heavy basket of supplies to her home when it slipped from her grasp, and she struggled to regain control. The Apache, who had been walking nearby, stepped forward. Without a word of judgment, he offered a steadying hand. She looked up into his eyes and for the first time felt neither fear nor doubt. There was no condescension, no whispering, only a calm acceptance that made her chest swell with pride and relief. "You are strong," he said simply, his voice deep and steady. "And that strength is yours, not theirs to judge." His words, though few, touched something deep within her, a validation she had never received before. After that moment, their encounters became frequent. The Apache was intrigued by her abilities, her courage, and the fire in her spirit. He began to challenge her in ways no one else had. He asked her to race him to the top of a hill, to lift objects heavier than she thought possible, and to demonstrate skills she had learned quietly over the years. Each challenge was designed not to belittle her, but to test her limits and show her potential. She accepted them eagerly, feeling a thrill she had never known. For the first time, someone truly recognized her power and encouraged her to explore it fully. It was not just physical challenges that mattered. The Apache also tested her mind and her spirit. He asked questions about her dreams, her fears, and the life she imagined for herself. Unlike others, he did not dismiss her ideas as foolish or unrealistic. He listened carefully, responded thoughtfully, and pushed her to think more deeply. Conversations that might have once seemed intimidating became exciting and enlightening. She discovered that there was a world beyond the town's narrow expectations, a place where strength and intelligence were celebrated rather than feared. Through these interactions, she began to see herself in a new light. She realized that being too big or too bold was not a flaw, it was a gift. The Apache did not see her as an outsider or a threat. He saw her as a person of value, capable of extraordinary things. This recognition was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It filled her with a quiet confidence that she had never fully known before. She began to stand taller, speak with more certainty, and take risks she had previously avoided. The world, which had once seemed cold and dismissive, began to feel alive with possibility. The townspeople, however, were slow to notice this transformation. Many still whispered and stared, unsure of how to react to her growing confidence and the attention she now received from the Apache. Some were jealous, others skeptical, and a few curious. But she paid little attention. She had learned that true validation does not come from gossip or approval. It comes from those who recognize your worth without question. The Apache became her mirror, reflecting back the strength and courage that had always been inside her, even when others could not see it. As the days passed, she and the Apache grew closer. Their bond was built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. He saw her not as a challenge or a novelty, but as an equal, someone whose abilities and spirit could inspire others if given the chance. She, in turn, trusted him in ways she had never trusted anyone. She felt safe to explore her potential, to test her limits, and to dream beyond the confines of the small town. This connection gave her a sense of purpose she had never known, a belief that she was meant for more than rejection and whispers. He also taught her lessons that went beyond strength and skill. He showed her the importance of patience, observation, and strategy. He explained that true power is not about physical ability alone, but about knowing when to act, when to wait, and how to use one's gifts wisely. She absorbed these lessons eagerly, feeling her mind and heart expand along with her body. Each day with him was a revelation, a chance to grow in ways she had never imagined. She began to understand that her uniqueness was not a burden but a path to greatness, if only she had guidance and the right person to see her potential. One afternoon, he took her to the outskirts of the town, to a quiet hill where the wind swept freely, and the world seemed vast and endless. "You have power," he said, "but power alone is not enough. You must also have wisdom, patience, and courage to guide it." She listened intently, feeling the truth of his words resonate deeply. For the first time, she realized that all the hardships, rejections, and struggles she had faced were not wasted. They had prepared her for this moment, for the recognition and guidance she had finally received. The Apache also helped her see the value in herself beyond strength. He admired her kindness, her curiosity, and her determination to persevere despite constant rejection. "You are more than what they say," he told her. "Your size, your strength, your courage, they are all part of you, but your heart, your mind, and your spirit are what truly make you powerful." These words stayed with her, echoing in her mind long after he left. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just as someone too big or too different, but as a whole person, capable of remarkable things. As the days turned into weeks, the people of the town began to notice a change in her. She moved with a quiet confidence, spoke with authority, and carried herself with a strength that was both physical and emotional. While some continued to whisper, others began to admire her courage. They saw that she was no longer the girl who hid from the world, nor the young woman who longed for acceptance. She had become someone who commanded respect simply by being herself. The Apache's recognition had awakened something within her, a fire that no one could extinguish. By the end of this period, she had transformed in ways even she did not fully understand. She had discovered her true power, not only in her body but in her mind, heart, and spirit. She had learned to trust herself, to recognize her worth, and to embrace the gifts that once made her feel unwanted. And perhaps most importantly, she had discovered that sometimes it only takes one person to see your potential to change the course of your life forever. The Apache had seen her power, and in doing so, he had helped her see it too. For the first time, she looked at the world and saw possibilities rather than obstacles. She realized that being unwanted by many had not been the end of her story. It had been preparation for the moment someone truly remarkable would recognize her value. She began to dream bigger dreams, challenge herself further, and embrace a life that was waiting for her beyond the judgments of others. Her journey of struggle and solitude had led her to this turning point, where recognition, respect, and possibility awaited. And so, in the quiet of the town and the presence of the Apache, she began to understand the true meaning of strength. It was not simply about lifting heavy objects or winning races. It was about resilience, courage, self-respect, and the ability to inspire others. She had been unwanted, dismissed, and misunderstood, but now she was seen, valued, and empowered. For the first time, she believed that her life was not defined by what others thought she should be, but by what she knew she could become. After her first encounters with the Apache, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The quiet recognition he had given her ignited a spark inside, a realization that her size, strength, and courage were not flaws, but gifts that set her apart. For the first time, she began to see herself through a lens of possibility rather than limitation. It was not just that someone had acknowledged her abilities. It was that she could now imagine a life in which her talents, determination, and uniqueness were celebrated instead of dismissed. She started to notice how her actions now had an impact. When she helped neighbors carry heavy loads or repair broken fences, they began to look at her differently. Some still whispered, still called her too big or too bold. But more and more, there were glances of admiration mixed with surprise. She walked with a new confidence, moving through the town streets not with the caution of someone trying to hide, but with the poise of someone who knew her worth. The very people who had once doubted her now paused to see what she would do next. Her interactions with the Apache had taught her something essential, that true power is a combination of skill, wisdom, and patience. She applied this lesson to every aspect of her life. When conflicts arose, she no longer responded with defensiveness or aggression. Instead, she observed, assessed, and acted thoughtfully. When someone underestimated her, she allowed them to see her strength through her actions rather than words. Slowly, her reputation began to shift. People who had dismissed her now sought her advice, help, or presence in tasks that required courage or skill. She had become a quiet leader in her town, though few fully understood how it had happened. The transformation was not only outward, it was deeply personal. She began to embrace her uniqueness fully, shedding the self-doubt that had lingered for years. Where she had once wondered if being strong and bold was a curse, she now recognized it as a rare and valuable gift. She started to dream bigger dreams, of travel, adventure, and learning new skills beyond the limits of her small town. She thought about the places she could go, the people she could meet, and the life she could create by embracing her true self. Her relationship with the Apache deepened during this time. He became more than a mentor. He was a mirror reflecting her potential back to her. He encouraged her to challenge herself, to step outside of her comfort zone, and to think in ways she had never considered. He asked her to consider her future, her values, and what she truly wanted from life. For the first time, she realized that her existence was not about fulfilling someone else's expectations, but about creating a life she could be proud of. The lessons he shared stayed with her long after he had gone, shaping her thoughts, decisions, and actions. One day, he brought her to a gathering outside the town, where people from neighboring communities had come together. Many were skilled, strong, and talented in their own ways. She observed them cautiously at first, unsure if she could belong among them. But the Apache encouraged her to step forward to showcase her abilities. Slowly, she found herself lifting, running, and demonstrating the very skills that had once made others whisper behind her back. She was met with awe and respect. For the first time, she felt seen in a way that went beyond acceptance. She was appreciated for who she truly was. The recognition she received began to change her interactions within her own town. People who had once ignored her or laughed at her efforts now approached her with respect and curiosity. She discovered that her confidence inspired others. Younger girls, who had grown up watching her navigate life with courage, started seeking her advice and guidance. Boys began to treat her with consideration rather than ridicule. Even some adults who had doubted her skills came to her for help, realizing that her strength and intelligence were undeniable. Her transformation was not just personal, it was creating ripples of change throughout the community. Despite these changes, she remained humble. She knew that true recognition and respect were earned through consistent action, not fleeting admiration. She continued to work tirelessly, whether it was helping with chores, guiding children across rivers, or assisting with difficult tasks in the town. She wanted her abilities to speak for themselves, and in doing so, she slowly gained the trust and admiration of those around her. Every act, no matter how small, was a testament to her dedication and resilience. Her life began to take on new meaning. She started to realize that her previous struggles, the rejection, the whispers, the isolation, had all been preparation for this stage of her life. They had taught her patience, resilience, and the importance of self-belief. She understood now that being different was not a burden. It was the key to becoming someone who could inspire others and create change. The lessons of hardship had shaped her into a woman of depth, strength, and wisdom, someone who could face challenges head-on and help others do the same. With this newfound perspective, she started to take on larger responsibilities. She led efforts to improve the town's infrastructure, assisted in training younger girls in skills they had never thought they could learn, and worked alongside adults in ways that required both leadership and courage. Her presence became indispensable. People no longer questioned her abilities, they relied on them. She was no longer just the big, strong girl who had been unwanted. She was a central figure in the community, someone whose contributions made a real difference. Even with all this recognition, her heart remained humble and kind. She remembered the times when she had been rejected, laughed at, and ignored. Those experiences had given her empathy, allowing her to connect with others who felt overlooked or underestimated. She became a mentor, a friend, and a guide to those who struggled with their own challenges. By embracing her strength fully and leading with compassion, she demonstrated that true power is not only physical but also emotional and moral. The Apache's influence continued to guide her. He encouraged her to see the world beyond her town, to imagine possibilities she had never considered, and to embrace her potential without fear. His faith in her abilities strengthened her confidence and reinforced the lessons she had learned from her own life experiences. She realized that having someone see her true power had changed everything. It had given her permission to believe in herself fully. As time went on, the change in her was undeniable. She moved through the town with grace and confidence, not seeking approval but naturally commanding respect. She had become a symbol of resilience and empowerment. Those who had once dismissed her could not help but notice her accomplishments, the respect she had earned, and the quiet yet undeniable strength she carried. Her journey had transformed not only her own life, but also the way her community viewed strength, courage, and individuality. By the end of this period, she had fully embraced her identity. She understood that her past struggles were not failures. They were the foundation of her growth. She had learned that being unwanted, rejected, or misunderstood did not define her worth. Instead, it had prepared her for the recognition and respect she now received. She had grown into a woman of power, wisdom, and compassion, someone who could face the world with confidence and inspire others along the way. Her story was no longer one of loneliness and struggle. It was a story of transformation, recognition, and empowerment. The Apache had seen her power when no one else did, and in doing so, he had helped her see it too. She now knew that life was not about fitting into the narrow expectations of others, but about embracing her true self, cultivating her gifts, and creating a meaningful life. With each passing day, she stepped more fully into the person she was always meant to be, a strong, capable, and respected woman whose journey of struggle had led to extraordinary growth and recognition. By now, she had fully embraced the power, strength, and uniqueness that had once made her feel unwanted. The girl who had been laughed at for being too big, too bold, or too different had grown into a woman of remarkable courage, skill, and wisdom. Her journey had been long and difficult, filled with rejection, loneliness, and doubt. Yet each challenge she faced had shaped her into someone extraordinary, someone capable of inspiring others and making a meaningful difference in her community. Her life had changed not just because of her abilities, but because she had finally learned to trust herself. The Apache had helped her see what she had always possessed: inner strength, courage, and the potential to create change. Through his guidance, she realized that recognition was not something given lightly by others, but something earned through consistent action, self-belief, and resilience. She now understood that she had always been worthy, and the world only needed to see her as she had always been. With this newfound confidence, she began to take on roles that would have seemed impossible in her younger years. She led projects in her town that required organization, courage, and leadership. She guided children and young adults in learning skills they had never believed possible, teaching them how to climb, run, lift, and think critically. She became a role model, showing others that being different was not a weakness but a source of strength. Many who had once ignored or dismissed her now sought her guidance, recognizing the wisdom and courage she carried. Her bond with the Apache continued to grow as well. He was no longer just a mentor or someone who recognized her power. He had become a trusted companion, someone whose faith in her abilities gave her further confidence to pursue her goals. Together, they explored new ideas, tackled challenges, and encouraged each other in ways that strengthened both of them. His presence reminded her that true connection is built on respect, understanding, and mutual support. She had discovered that being seen for who she truly was could transform not only her own life, but also the lives of those around her. The town slowly began to accept this new version of her. People who had once whispered behind her back now greeted her with respect. Boys who had avoided her now sought her advice or assistance, recognizing her as someone capable and reliable. Younger girls looked up to her, seeing in her an example of courage and determination. Even adults who had doubted her abilities now came to rely on her judgment and guidance. She had transformed from the unwanted girl into a symbol of empowerment and resilience. Despite the admiration and respect she now received, she remained humble and grounded. She remembered the days when she had felt invisible and dismissed, and those memories gave her empathy and compassion. She reached out to others who felt overlooked or underestimated, helping them discover their own strengths and abilities. She understood that true empowerment is not just about personal success, but about lifting others and inspiring them to see their potential. In this way, her journey came full circle. She had once longed to be recognized, and now helped others find their own recognition. Her accomplishments were not limited to physical strength alone. She had developed a keen mind, learning strategy, problem-solving, and emotional intelligence. She could assess situations quickly, make thoughtful decisions, and guide others with both firmness and kindness. People admired her not only for her abilities but for the way she carried herself, with confidence, integrity, and compassion. She had learned that true power comes from a balance of strength, wisdom, and heart, and she embodied all three fully. The Apache remained a constant presence in her life, encouraging her to explore new horizons. With his support, she began to dream beyond the confines of her town. She thought about the world outside, imagining opportunities to use her abilities to help others, learn new skills, and experience life in ways she had never dared before. Her confidence in herself had grown so much that she no longer feared the unknown. Instead, she looked forward to it, seeing each challenge as an opportunity to grow and demonstrate her capabilities. Her family watched her transformation with pride and awe. They had always known she was special, but even they were amazed at the depth of her strength, courage, and wisdom. They no longer worried about how others would perceive her because they saw how she had carved her own path, earning respect and admiration through her actions. They had been her quiet supporters, and now they could celebrate her fully, knowing she had achieved a life of purpose, recognition, and fulfillment. Even with all the attention and admiration, she remained focused on what mattered most, being true to herself. She knew that life would always bring challenges and obstacles, but she no longer feared them. She had faced rejection, loneliness, and doubt, and had emerged stronger and wiser each time. Her experiences had taught her that her worth was never defined by others' opinions, but by her own belief in herself and her dedication to living authentically. As she grew into full adulthood, she became a central figure in her community, a person people turned to for guidance, support, and inspiration. She helped plan events, organize training sessions, and assist in solving difficult problems. Her presence brought calm, confidence, and courage to those around her. She had become more than just a strong woman. She had become a symbol of hope, perseverance, and empowerment. People who had once doubted her now marveled at her accomplishments and the respect she had earned. Her journey had also taught her the importance of patience and understanding. She remembered the days when she had longed for recognition, when every whisper of doubt had felt like a personal failure. Now she understood that growth takes time, that people change at different speeds, and that true recognition comes not from rushing but from consistent effort and self-belief. She encouraged others to embrace their journeys fully, to trust themselves, and to recognize that even obstacles and setbacks could be valuable lessons in disguise. Through all this, her relationship with the Apache remained a cornerstone of her life. He had not only recognized her power when no one else did, but had continued to guide, challenge, and inspire her. Their bond was built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared purpose. With him, she learned that true partnership is about lifting each other up, seeing the potential in one another, and facing life's challenges together. He had opened her eyes to possibilities she had never imagined, and in return, she had shown him the power of resilience, courage, and authenticity. By the end of this chapter in her life, she had fully transformed from the unwanted girl into a woman of extraordinary presence, power, and purpose. She had learned to embrace her uniqueness, trust her abilities, and live authentically. The whispers that once haunted her were now replaced by admiration, respect, and inspiration. She had not only changed her own life, but had also impacted the lives of everyone around her, showing them that strength, courage, and authenticity are qualities to be celebrated. Her story became a source of inspiration for many. People spoke of the girl who had been unwanted, who had faced rejection and doubt, and who had emerged stronger, wiser, and empowered. She became a living example of the truth that life is not about conforming to others' expectations, but about embracing who you truly are, cultivating your gifts, and using them to make a difference. Her journey showed that even in the face of adversity, recognition, respect, and fulfillment are possible when you believe in yourself and persevere. Finally, she realized that her life was no longer defined by what others thought she should be, but by the person she had become. She had discovered her true power, embraced her heart and mind, and cultivated the wisdom to guide both herself and others. She had found recognition, respect, and connection, not because she had changed to fit expectations, but because she had fully embraced her unique gifts. The girl who had once been unwanted had grown into a woman who could change the world simply by being herself. And so, her story reached a beautiful truth, that being seen and valued for who you are can transform not only your life, but the lives of those around you. The Apache had seen her power when no one else did, and in doing so, he had helped her see it too. She had learned that strength, courage, and authenticity are forces that cannot be hidden, and that true recognition comes to those who live fully and embrace their true selves. With this knowledge, she stepped forward into the future with confidence, purpose, and a heart ready to inspire and empower others.